The biting Chicago wind howled between skyscrapers, a cold predator in the urban night. For Isabella Rossi, it was the soundtrack to her exhaustion. Each evening she crossed from the glittering warmth of Athlard's restaurant, all truffle oil and crystal glasses, into the alley's bitter chill. But tonight someone waited there. An old man huddled beneath a thin coat, eyes like forgotten stories. She could walk past him, or stop. A small choice, she thought. Yet it would unravel a billionaire's darkest secret and change her life forever. The cold was no stranger to Izzy Rossi. It lived in her tiny studio apartment in Pilsen, with its cracked windows and piles of nursing textbooks. It haunted her early bus rides to work and clung to her even inside Ethelgard's golden dining room, a temple for Chicago's elite. Inside, soft jazz played beneath murmured deals and half-smiles. Light was artfully designed to flatter the wealthy, to hide their flaws. Izzy floated through it all, silent, invisible, balancing plates of Wagyu and scallops that cost more than her weekly groceries. Her manager, Mr. Peterson, saw everything, his mustache sharp, his tone sharper. "Rossi," he hissed earlier that night. "Table 7. Mrs. Dubois' water glass is 2/3 full. What's our policy?" "Always above 3/4, Mr. Peterson." "Then why," he snapped, "are we having this conversation?" Izzy smiled through it, as always. The job paid her mother's medical bills back in Ohio, the debt that forced her to pause her dreams of becoming a nurse. So she endured the fake smiles and aching feet. That night, a party of tech investors left her drained. When she finally clocked out, her feet throbbed and her spirit sagged. She slipped through the back door, her shortcut through the alley, where the city's luxury faded into shadows and sour air. The old man had been there for a week now. He never begged, never spoke, just sat still beside the dumpsters wrapped in silence. Others passed without a glance, the city's unspoken rule. Don't look, don't engage. Izzy had obeyed that rule. Until tonight. Rain began to fall. Thin, icy needles. The man trembled violently, knees pulled to his chest, arms wrapped tight. Her bus would arrive in 5 minutes. Warmth waited at home, yet her feet didn't move. She saw his hands shake, his head bowed against the storm. He wasn't a problem or a statistic. He was a person, and he was cold. Before she could think, Izzy turned back into the kitchen. The chef, Gus, a burly man with a kind heart, was wiping the counters. "Forget something, Izzy?" he asked. "Is there any tomato soup left from the staff meal?" He raised a brow. "Thought you said you weren't hungry." "It's for a stray cat," she lied. Gus grunted, poured steaming soup into a paper cup, and wrapped 2 rolls in a napkin. "Cats get hungry too," he said softly. "Thanks, Gus." Outside, the rain stung her face. The man hadn't moved. She approached gently. "Excuse me, sir," she said. He looked up, and she froze. His eyes were a piercing, tired blue, full of intelligence and sorrow. Not the vacant eyes she expected. "I thought you might be cold," she stammered, offering the soup. "It's just tomato, but it's hot." He stared at it for a long moment, pride wrestling with need. Then he took it, his fingers brushing hers, skin like ice. He drank slowly, eyes closing in quiet relief. "Thank you," he rasped. His voice was rough yet cultured, a voice that once belonged to someone important. "You're welcome," she whispered. "I'm Isabella." He met her gaze. "Arthur," he said softly. She missed her bus that night, but watching him eat, something stirred inside her, a fragile warmth she hadn't felt in months. From then on, it became a ritual. Each night after work, Gus left leftovers on the counter. No questions asked. Soup, pie, sometimes even chocolate cake that wasn't perfect enough for the dining room. Every night, Arthur waited in his corner of the alley. Their words were few, but their silences spoke volumes. Izzy learned the language of his quiet. Gratitude. The way his shoulders eased when she appeared. the faint smile that reached his eyes. One night she brought him a wool blanket from a thrift store, a garish plaid but warm. "This is too much," he murmured. "No, it's not," she insisted. "No one should have to be this cold." He ran his fingers along the fabric. "There was a time I despised plaid," he said, almost smiling. "My wife, Elena, loved it. She wanted our whole lake house covered in it. Curtains, sofas, everything. I told her it was ghastly." He paused, lost in memory. "Now, it feels like the warmest thing in the world." It was the first time he mentioned a past, a wife, a lake house. Izzy didn't press. She just whispered, "She had good taste." And in that cold Chicago alley between the warmth of a restaurant and the bitterness of the wind, two strangers, a tired waitress and a fallen man, began to thaw the edges of their loneliness. As days turned to weeks, Izzy found herself looking forward to those quiet moments behind the restaurant, the brief exchanges that had become the most genuine part of her day. In a world built on transactions and forced smiles, Arthur was her reminder that real connection still existed. She told him about her paused nursing degree, her dreams of working in an emergency room one day. Arthur always listened with an attentiveness that made her feel seen, as if her struggles and ambitions were the most important story in the world. "You have a healer's spirit, Isabella," he said one cold evening after she'd complained about a brutal pharmacology chapter. "It's a rare and precious thing. Don't let the world dull it." His words stayed with her. Arthur spoke like no one she'd ever met on the streets. One night, he analyzed the architecture of the alleyway buildings. Another, he discussed classical music when a faint melody drifted from a passing car. He quoted philosophers, understood economics, even recited lines from poets she'd only read about in school. It became clear that Arthur wasn't merely a man who had fallen on hard times. He was someone who had fallen from a great height, but her secret kindness didn't stay hidden for long. One evening, as Izzy passed Arthur a steaming container of beef stew, she caught movement in a nearby window. The sharp silhouette of her manager, Mr. Peterson, staring down from his office above. Her stomach dropped. The next day, he cornered her near the service station. "Rossi," he began, voice low and deliberate. "I'm told you've adopted a little charity project in our service alley." Her pulse quickened. "I don't know what you mean, Mr. Peterson." "Don't play coy with me," he snapped. "I'm talking about the vagrant you've been feeding. Ethelgard's reputation depends on cleanliness and discretion. We cannot have our establishment associated with that." He gestured toward the back alley, his lips curling. "He's not bothering anyone," Izzy replied, her voice trembling. "He's just an old man who's hungry." "He's a liability," Peterson countered, eyes cold. "An eyesore. Our patrons, people like Mrs. Dubois, pay for an experience of luxury, not to step over a homeless man on their way to their limousines. What happens if he approaches one of them?" "He wouldn't," she protested, anger replacing fear. "He's a good man." Peterson let out a short, derisive laugh. "A good man? Rossi, your naivety is becoming a liability in itself. Consider this your warning. If I see you speaking to him again, you'll be looking for another job. Understood?" The words hit her like a slap. This job wasn't just a paycheck. It was her mother's medication, the rent, her only hope of returning to school someday. Losing it would unravel everything. That night, Izzy lingered by the kitchen door, the container of stew heavy in her hands. The echo of Peterson's warning twisted in her chest. She could just leave. Pretend she never knew Arthur. It would be smart. Safe. But as the wind howled outside, another thought gripped her. He'll think I abandoned him. After everything life had taken from him, she couldn't bear to be one more person who turned her back. Taking a steadying breath, she pushed open the door and stepped into the freezing alley. Arthur was there, huddled beneath his plaid blanket, a fragile island of stillness in the wind. When he looked up and saw her, relief washed over his worn features. "I was worried," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I'm late," she replied, handing him the food. She didn't mention Peterson. She wouldn't let her problems shadow this small moment of peace. As Arthur ate, Izzy studied his face under the pale security light. His features were lined but dignified, his posture still straight despite the cold. His hands, though grimy, had the long, elegant fingers of a pianist, or a man who once gave commands that others obeyed. After a moment, she asked softly, "Arthur, if you don't mind me asking, what did you do before all this?" He froze, a piece of bread halfway to his mouth. Silence filled the space between them, broken only by the distant hum of traffic. His gaze drifted to the dark mouth of the alley, as if the answer lived somewhere out there, far beyond reach. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, in a voice touched by something between regret and pride, he said quietly, "I was a builder," Arthur said, his voice barely above the wind. "Not of houses, not with my hands. I built companies. I took ideas and small sparks and then gave them life. I built things meant to last." His words hung in the cold air, heavy and fragile, carrying a sorrow that seemed to drain the light around them. A builder of companies. A man with a lake house, a wife who loved plaid. The pieces began to fit together, into a picture of success lost to tragedy. "What happened?" Izzy asked softly. He shook his head, a gesture of quiet defeat. "A storm came," he whispered, "and I wasn't strong enough to hold the walls up. They crashed down, and I was buried underneath." He met her gaze, blue eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Sometimes, Isabella," he said, "it's easier to stay buried than to try and dig yourself out." The words struck something deep within her. She wished she could help him, do more than offer a meal and a few minutes of warmth. But she was just a waitress fighting her own storms, bills, debt, and a mother waiting for help hundreds of miles away. That night, as Izzy walked home, the weight of Arthur's pain and Peterson's warning pressed against her chest like the Chicago cold. She was walking a tightrope, and the wind was rising. By the first Friday of November, winter had fully claimed the city. The air outside was sharp, the kind that made people hurry indoors, into the warm glow of Ethelgard's dining room. Inside, laughter clinked against crystal glasses. Perfume hung heavy in the air. The wealthy had gathered to escape the frost, and Izzy floated among them, a ghost in black uniform and tired shoes, but her thoughts were elsewhere. On Arthur, alone in the alley wrapped in a soaked plaid blanket, fighting the biting rain, at table 7 sat the source of her current anxiety, Mrs. Dubois, a loyal customer and one of Peterson's favorites, which made her temper even more dangerous. "This Chateaubriand," Mrs. Dubois declared, prodding the steak with her fork, "is tragically underseasoned. Has Chef Gus's palate gone on vacation?" "I'm very sorry, ma'am," Izzy replied with a smile that felt like glass cracking. "I'll have a new one prepared immediately. See that you do." Mrs. Dubois leaned closer to her companions. "And another thing, the element this place is attracting lately is unacceptable. On my way in, my driver nearly ran over some filthy transient loitering in the alley. He was staring at my car. Can you imagine?" Izzy froze mid-step. Her heart slammed against her ribs, but her expression stayed neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am," she murmured, collecting the plate. Mrs. Dubois wasn't finished. "A restaurant of this caliber cannot have vagrants cluttering its back entrance. It lowers the tone, and it's a safety issue. I'll be speaking to Mr. Peterson personally." The words felt like a noose tightening around Izzy's throat. She hurried back to the kitchen, her hands trembling. Gus took the complaint with a muttered curse and tossed a new steak on the grill. "That woman wouldn't know good food if it bit her," he grumbled. But Izzy barely heard him. Her mind was spinning. Peterson would hear about this, and when he did, he'd connect the dots. He'd know exactly who Mrs. Dubois had seen. For the next hour, she moved through her shift in a blur. Every time she spotted Peterson's sharp profile gliding through the dining room, dread clenched her stomach. But he said nothing. He was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. By closing time, Izzy's nerves were shredded. Yet even under threat of losing everything, she couldn't leave Arthur hungry. In the kitchen, she quietly wrapped a thick slice of pot roast and roasted vegetables in foil, tucking it into a paper bag. Her hands shook as she approached the service door. Outside, the night was unforgiving. The sleet had turned to heavy snow, coating the alley in a grimy gray slush. She squinted through the falling flakes and saw him. Arthur sat where he always did, huddled beneath his soaked blanket, his shoulders trembling violently. "Arthur!" She gasped, rushing forward. He looked up, pale and shaking, his lips blue from the cold. Despite the shivering, he managed a faint, broken smile. "Isabella," he said through chattering teeth. His voice was so weak it barely reached her. And in that moment, standing under the flickering alley light, Izzy realized the danger wasn't Peterson anymore. It was the storm, and it was swallowing Arthur whole. "You shouldn't be out in this," Izzy said, her voice trembling. "Neither should you," Arthur replied weakly. She handed him the warm container. "Here, eat this quickly." As his frozen fingers fumbled with the lid, a sudden flash of blinding light flooded the alley. The service door burst open, and there stood Mr. Peterson, framed like a villain in a cheap play, flanked by 2 massive security guards. "Well, well," Peterson sneered. "I believe I gave you a very clear instruction." Izzy froze, her pulse racing. Arthur shrank against the wall, eyes wide with fear. "Mr. Peterson, please," she pleaded. "It's freezing. He has nowhere to go." "That is not my concern." Peterson's voice was cold as the snow beneath his polished shoes. He glanced down at Arthur with utter disgust. "On your feet. You're trespassing. Collect your garbage and leave." Arthur struggled to stand, clutching his soaked blanket. I wasn't bothering anyone," he stammered. "Your very presence is a bother," Peterson spat. "You're a health hazard." "Get him out of here!" The guards stepped forward. One reached for Arthur's arm, but Izzy darted between them. "No! Stop it, you can't do this." "Get out of the way!" Peterson barked. "You're fired. Is protecting this bum worth your job?" For a heartbeat, Izzy faltered. Her mother's medical bills, the rent, the student loans, everything she'd been fighting for hung in the balance, but then she looked at Arthur, trembling, humiliated, terrified. And something inside her snapped. "Yes," she said, her voice ringing through the snow. "It is. He's a person. He deserves dignity." Peterson laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. "Dignity? He lost that when he chose to live in the gutter." He nodded to his guards. "Remove them both if you have to." One guard shoved Izzy aside. She stumbled, catching herself on the icy ground. The other ripped Arthur's blanket away and threw it into a puddle, then grabbed him by the collar. "Get your hands off him," Izzy screamed. Just as the roar of an engine sliced through the chaos, a sleek black Bentley glided into the alley, headlights cutting through the falling snow like blades of light. It stopped mere feet away. The driver's door opened and a tall man stepped out, sharply dressed in a charcoal suit that radiated wealth and power. His expression was unreadable, carved in control, until his blue eyes, the same piercing blue as Arthur's, locked onto the scene before him. For a moment, time itself froze. He looked from the guards to Peterson, then to Izzy, and finally to Arthur. The mask of control shattered. His face crumpled with shock and grief. When he spoke, his voice cracked with disbelief. "Dad." The word cut through the snow like thunder. The guards froze, their hands still gripping Arthur. Peterson's sneer faltered. Izzy stood speechless, her mind spinning. "Dad?" The man in the suit took a slow, hesitant step forward. "Dad, is it really you?" Arthur stared back, pale and trembling, his lips parting soundlessly. The shame in his eyes was unbearable. Peterson, scrambling to recover, forced a nervous laugh. "Sir, there must be some mistake. This man is a vagrant. I assure you." The stranger turned toward him, eyes blazing with an icy fury that silenced the world. "Did I speak to you?" he asked, voice quiet but lethal. Peterson stammered, his confidence evaporating. "No, sir. Mr. Vance, I didn't realize." The name hit Izzy like a shockwave. Vance. Nathaniel Vance. The elusive, ruthless CEO of Vance Holdings International, the man who owned Ethel Guards and half the city's skyline. A billionaire who hadn't been photographed in years. Now standing in a filthy alley calling a homeless man Dad. Nathaniel ignored Peterson entirely. His focus never left Arthur. "What happened to you?" he whispered, stepping closer. "I looked for you for years. I thought you were gone." He reached out a trembling hand, then hesitated, afraid to touch him, afraid the moment might vanish. Arthur's voice came out a frail rasp. "Nathaniel, You shouldn't be here. His eyes darted toward Peterson, the guards, and finally Izzy, the girl who had shown him more kindness than the world ever had. Snow swirled around them, silent witnesses to a reunion years in the making. One built not on wealth or power, but on broken hearts and second chances. The shame on Arthur's face was almost physical. I own this building, Nathaniel said, his voice sharp with disbelief. I have every right to be here. The question is, why are you here? Like this? His gesture swept over the torn coat, the frozen ground, the unbearable scene. Before Arthur could speak, Peterson, realizing the power shift, scrambled to recover. He barked at the guards, "You idiots! Help Mr. Vance's father get his blanket." The guard snatched the filthy, soaked blanket from the puddle, holding it like a sacred object. The other dropped Arthur's collar as if burned. Nathaniel's cold gaze pinned Peterson. "What's your name?" "Robert Peterson, sir." "General manager," he stammered, wringing his hands. "It was all a misunderstanding. A complaint from Mrs. Dubois about vagrancy. I was simply enforcing company policy on hygiene and—" "Company policy?" Nathaniel repeated, voice dangerously calm. "Is it company policy to have your guards assault an elderly man in a snowstorm? To throw away his only source of warmth? To treat a human being like garbage?" Each word landed like a blow. Peterson flinched with everyone. "No, sir. A terrible error in judgment," he muttered. Nathaniel's attention shifted to Izzy. She stood drenched and trembling, defiance flickering in her eyes despite the fear. "And you?" Nathaniel asked, his tone softening slightly. "Who are you?" "My name is Isabella Rossi," she said, voice steady though her heart raced. "I was a waitress here." "She was insubordinate," Peterson interjected quickly. "I had to fire her. She fed him against direct orders." Nathaniel turned to Arthur, who was still clutching the container of pot roast. Understanding dawned instantly. "You fed him?" he asked Izzy quietly. She met his gaze. "Yes, he was hungry. And cold." Even after Nathaniel motioned toward Peterson. "Told you to stop?" "Yes." Something flickered in Nathaniel's eyes. Respect, gratitude, and grief all at once. He removed his own tailored jacket and gently draped it over his father's frail shoulders. The contrast was jarring. Fine cashmere against tattered cloth. Two worlds colliding. "We're getting you out of here," he said firmly, placing an arm around Arthur's shoulders. As they passed Peterson, Nathaniel stopped. His voice stayed low, but it carried lethal precision. "Mr. Peterson, be in my office in 1 hour. Pack your things first, you won't be returning." He turned to the guards. "You're both done. Leave immediately." Then to Izzy. "Miss Rossi, you're coming with us." It wasn't a request. Arthur leaned heavily on his son as they climbed into the Bentley. Nathaniel opened the door for Izzy. His piercing blue eyes met hers, intelligent, commanding, and burning with restrained emotion. She slid into the car beside Arthur, her damp uniform clinging to her as the rich scent of leather surrounded her. The door shut with a solid thud, sealing away the alley and the shattered remains of her old life. The Bentley glided through the snowy streets, its silence almost regal. Arthur huddled under his son's jacket, staring out at the glittering city lights. His reflection in the glass looked ghostly, half man, half memory. In the front seat, Nathaniel was a storm barely contained. He spoke into his phone, each word clipped and precise. "Clear my morning, all of it. And have Dr. Alistair Reed meet me at the penthouse in an hour. It's personal. Also, get me everything you can on Robert Peterson. Ethel Guards, Michigan Avenue. I want it all." He ended the call. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken years. The car descended into a private garage, stopping before an elevator. Discreet security appeared, flanking them as Nathaniel guided Arthur and Izzy inside. The ascent was swift and silent. When the doors opened, they stepped into a penthouse that spanned the entire top floor, a world of glass and chrome overlooking a glittering Chicago skyline. The beauty was cold, sterile, like a museum built by loneliness. Nathaniel led Arthur to a cream sofa. Arthur sank down stiffly, clutching the jacket as though afraid it might vanish. "I'll get you some dry clothes," Nathaniel said before disappearing down a hall. Izzy stood near the door, soaked, small, unsure. She didn't belong here, yet she couldn't walk away. Arthur looked up at her, his eyes full of shame. "Isabella, I'm so sorry for dragging you into this, for what it's cost you." "Don't apologize," she said gently, stepping closer. You're safe now. That's all that matters. Nathaniel returned, holding a thick cashmere robe and towel. He knelt before his father, voice strained. Dad, you need to change out of those wet clothes. Arthur's hands shook too much to unbutton his coat. Nathaniel helped, the gesture painfully intimate. Beneath the soaked layers, Arthur's frailty was startling, a shadow of the man he'd been. Nathaniel wrapped the robe around him, his jaw tight, eyes glassy with restrained emotion. Once Arthur was settled, he turned to Izzy. Please, Miss Rossi, he said quietly, motioning to a chair. Sit. The warmth of the penthouse couldn't thaw the storm between them, but for the first time that night, Izzy sensed this was not an ending. It was the beginning of a truth long buried in the snow. The vast penthouse felt less like a home and more like a courtroom. Nathaniel Vance sat across from his father and Izzy, the silence between them thick with years of unspoken pain. I owe you an explanation, Nathaniel began, his gaze drifting between the two. And, a debt of gratitude, he turned to Arthur, his father. I haven't seen him in 10 years. Not since the funeral. His voice trembled at the word. When my mother, Eleanor, passed, everything fell apart. She was the heart of our family. My father, he hesitated, glancing at the frail man before him. He wasn't just grieving. He was consumed by it. He stopped going to the office. He stopped living. Arthur looked down, guilt etched into every line of his face. I was 24, Nathaniel continued. Ambitious, angry. I saw his grief as weakness. The company he built, Vance Development, was falling apart. And Marcus Sterling, his partner, was circling like a vulture. Arthur's lips trembled at the name. Marcus, I tried to warn you, he whispered. But you wouldn't listen, Nathaniel said, the anger of his youth still burning faintly in his tone. I told you he was cooking the books. You refused to see it, so I confronted him myself. He forced you to sign everything away, our company, our home, until nothing was left. He looked at his father with pain and disbelief. And then, you vanished. Just a note saying I should forget about you. I searched for years. I thought you were dead. Arthur finally lifted his eyes, glistening with tears. I was ashamed, Nathaniel. I failed your mother. Failed you. I lost everything I built, and couldn't face you. It was easier to disappear than let you see what I'd become. He spoke of his years on the street, odd jobs, shelters, and the slow slide into invisibility. It wasn't just ruin. It was a collapse of the soul. Nathaniel listened silently, his face hard, until a single tear escaped. You didn't fail me, Dad, he whispered. I failed you. I should have stayed. I should have fought for you, not just the company. The doorbell chimed. A silver-haired man entered, Dr. Reed. He's going to make sure you're all right, Dad, Nathaniel said softly. While the doctor examined Arthur, Nathaniel drew Izzy aside. His tone shifted, quiet, raw. What you did for my father. There are no words. You showed him kindness when even I didn't. You have something money can't buy. I owe you more than I can say. Izzy shook her head. I didn't do it for a reward, Mr. Vance. It was just the right thing. Nathaniel gave a faint, genuine smile, the first in years. That's what makes it remarkable. Then his expression hardened again. If you'll excuse me, I have garbage to take out. He crossed the room and activated a video feed. On the screen sat Peterson, the disgraced manager, sweating in a sterile conference room. Mr. Peterson, Nathaniel said, his voice cold. 22 years of service, efficient, profitable. But your record shows a pattern. Bullying, intimidation, and a toxic workplace culture. Tell me, was Isabella Rossi disgruntled too? Peterson stammered. She was insubordinate. Her judgment, Nathaniel cut in, was the only thing of value in that alley tonight. He leaned closer to the camera. You're done, Peterson. Effective immediately. Your severance is minimal, your reputation worse. And if you challenge it, I'll release the footage, showing you assaulting a homeless man. My father? Peterson's face went white. Yes, Mr. Vance, understood. Nathaniel ended the call. The screen went black and the anger drained from his face, leaving only exhaustion. Dr. Reed approached quietly. He'll recover, he told Nathaniel, but the deeper wounds aren't physical. He needs his son. Later, as Arthur slept, Nathaniel poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to Izzy. "Now," he said softly, "let's talk about you. You lost your job because of my father, because of me. I could fix that, give you a promotion, write a check that solves everything. Just name your price." Izzy hesitated. A check would erase her struggles, but she thought of Arthur, of the alley, of all the unseen people like him. "I don't want a check," she said quietly, "or a promotion. I want you to do better. Your company has resources, food, space, power. Use them, start a foundation, help the homeless with shelter, job training, medical care, turn your alleys of neglect into places of hope. Let me run it." Her words filled the room like a challenge. Nathaniel stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his eyes. Then slowly he smiled. "A healer's spirit," he murmured, glancing at his sleeping father. "He was right about you." He extended his hand. "All right, Izzy Rossi, you're hired. Executive Director of the Vance Foundation for Urban Assistance. Your first task, make sure no one ever freezes in one of our alleys again." Izzy took his hand. This wasn't charity, it was purpose. 6 months later, spring thawed Chicago's frost and the years of silence between father and son. Arthur, now healthy and peaceful, tended his small garden while Nathaniel visited daily. The Vance Foundation flourished, its programs transforming alleys into community shelters, its name reborn as a symbol of compassion. And as the city healed, so did they. One evening, standing in the alley where it all began, Nathaniel turned to Izzy. "What you built?" "It's beautiful," he said. She smiled. "We built it." A single act of kindness had rebuilt a family, transformed an empire, and rekindled hope for thousands. Because sometimes, one cup of soup can change the world.